And I guess one of the questions that I have is like, if he isn't viewed as a starter, because it would be a nice swap. I feel like he'd be getting a cheaper player with Vezenkov as opposed to Barnes. But like, what if they want to do role player thing? Like, yeah, we see him as a good role player. Everybody likes Lyles. We like Lyles. Lyles is great. He has a great connection with the rest of the team. But we asked it a couple months ago. It's like, doesn't Vezenkov kind of almost seem like he could, like in terms of what he offers, especially talking about the offense, it's like he could slide in as a backup four, as it were, maybe be a replacement for Lyles. I mean, I if I'm not mistaken, I'm not like a contract expert, but it's like you're probably looking at like a mid-level contract, maybe 5 to 7.5 million for Lyles. You might be looking at a little bit. I mean, I really don't know what you're going to get at a Vezenkov contract wise, but I feel like it would be somewhere around that $7 million range. And maybe I'll eat my words on that one. Again, I'm not purporting to be an expert there, but it almost feels like there's that potential. Do you have like any initial feelings about that? Or like, do you feel like he has to be a starter or a role player? Do you feel like they could keep him and Lyles? Again, like a lot of this is a little out of reach at this point in mid-May, but I don't know, do you have any initial feelings?
I mean, it is a good point where it's like, because, I mean, you have to bring Lyles back, right? That should be a priority. Even if you bring Vezenkov, which sounds like it will happen. But it's like, yeah, they kind of sound like similar players and stretch fours, probably off the bench too. I see Sasha more as a guy coming off the bench initially. I don't know if you get, I mean, it's just like, I just feel like it's too big of a question mark to throw Vezenkov in at 3 in place of Barnes and then hoping to really take a big next step next season, a big jump next season. Just seems a little risky. I don't know. Maybe Lyles, they play him more at the small 5 and kind of go that trajectory. But it does sound like if they are coming off the bench together, they'll be fighting for minutes, which I don't know. It'd be interesting. But I think they'll both be here next season, and I both think they'll be off the bench. So I don't know. That makes me think maybe Lyles will just slide down to the 5. I mean, he played it well enough. I don't know how he'd handle bigger guys, but at the same time, Metu was our backup 5 all year, or most of the year, I should say. And I think him and Lyles are the same size, right? They're the same height, probably about the same weight too. So I don't know. Be kind of interesting, but
well,
yeah.
You know what's interesting is I think we had a conversation outside the podcast. I don't think we talked about it on here, but it's like if we're talking about like moving Murray to the 3, so to speak, and then needing a power forward to start, like what about, especially with the question marks about Sasha Vezenkov's defense and what exactly he'll look like in the league? I mean, I understand, like I'm reluctant to even say this because you're talking about it wanting to improve upon a 48-win season. This does not sound like you're intent on improving on a 48-win season, but it's like, would Lyles start in that situation if they keep both of them? Because the one thing, I like the idea of Lyles being the small 5, but I mean, he could handle that for most of the time, especially if you get like a cheaper, kind of bigger body to kind of alternate based maybe on matchups or something like that, or what's needed on any given night. But we did mention it's like Lyles obviously would not be better than Barnes in the starting lineup, but given the growth both of like having a full year of the offense under your belt, having the understanding of what you need to do to succeed in this offense and succeed when playoff time comes. We're talking about Herter needing to work on his conditioning or Sabonis needing to work on his jump shot. So there'd be like growth around him. I mean, is it crazy to say that like Lyles could start? I guess that's just a long-winded way of asking that.
I mean, Lyles could start personally. I'd rather have Vezenkov start just because I just found Lyles super valuable off the bench and he embraced that role. Where Vezenkov, I mean, I'm not trying to like, feed into this man's ego, but he is a 2-time MVP. He is a starter, maybe someone who would, fit in better with that starting lineup. I don't know. I just like Lyles was so good off the bench and he was a big part of our depth. I wouldn't want to lose that off the bench. I would rather start Vezenkov in that sense if we have the two. And just because Vezenkov's a guy who's been starting the last several years, or probably the last 8 years of his life in the Greek league, or however long he was there. I saw he won the Greek league MVP in 2015 and 2022 last year. So I'm like, he's been a star for a minute. So I think he would probably play a little better as a starter. I'm not sure if he could embrace that bench role.
Yeah, I think honestly another point. I think that's a good point. For coming at it from a different direction. There's a video on YouTube from Basket News, which covers the EuroLeague and like all European basketball, and it was a clip from a podcast of a couple of insiders or journalists, reporters, and they were talking about Vezenkov coming to the NBA and their kind of worries about their concerns, and they cited Nicolo Melli, who I think went to the Pelicans and then was on the Mavericks for a couple of years, and he was like this 6'9" shooter, and he ended up just getting kind of stuck in a corner and never really saw a ton of playing time, never really saw a bunch of success, and left because he felt like he's not able to do what he needs to do here. And they were kind of pointing to that as like, I mean, if you do that to like a burgeoning star and a European star with Vezenkov, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, is he going to be able to mesh with that? Take on a completely different role, completely reduced role? Like, how is that going to work with his psyche? How would that work with his ability to want to kind of help an NBA team succeed by taking a huge step back? I mean, that has to factor into it.
Yeah.
Because you are talking about a guy that is one of the best players in Europe. And yeah, that definitely factors into it. It's just like one of those things where it's like, I'm glad Monty McNair is at the top of this decision-making thing, because there's so much to consider here. And there's so many little things, whether it's about wanting to keep X, Y, and Z, or is, this guy going to work in the starting lineup or whatnot, or really, what are you going to get out of Sasha Vezenkov, particularly on the defensive end? I don't know. But the positivity's there. Everybody seems so positive. I think, Mike Brown has a tendency to talk up players, but like, even listening to, he just said, he's saying what we were just saying. I mean, he's a perfect fit for the offense. If you watch Olympiacos play, they play fast. They try to embody that kind of, I guess, it's not even 100% modern basketball, but kind of what's more in vogue, what's kind of seen as successful these days. And I think in that sense, while it might be a little bit of over optimism, I don't think they would just be over optimistic about that. I mean, I think that they genuinely feel like he'll be able to plug in and make the best offense in the league even better. And, if things do work out on the defensive end, like I think that there's a potential for Vezenkov to, like I said, I think he'd be a better shooter than Barnes. I think Barnes kind of brings maybe a more dynamic impact and kind of intangible impact with his experience and whatnot, but like, there's a realistic chance that offensively speaking, you would be getting about the same, maybe even an upgrade on offense. And again, I'm prepared to eat my words on all this because I don't know. Like, it's so hard to say.
I'll defend you on that. I think Vezenkov,
thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. He just seems like a better shooter, and like I watched his highlights and stuff, and he seems more capable than just being a guy. It's like, all right, just sit in the corner, kind of like Murray did last season. I think he can do other stuff. He can play in the post. He has a nice little fadeaway. So I think he's more than just a guy who's just going to shoot in the corner. I think he's a better offensive player. I think he can be, for sure, just solely off of his shooting alone. Even though he's more dynamic than that. And especially with Fox and Sabonis surrounding you, if he can get open looks, I mean, he's going to get an open look, right? Playing with those two. So I think that'd be a nice little upgrade. Just add a better shooter to a team that really only needs shooters. I mean, and like 3-and-D guys, I guess. But yeah, that D part is a big question mark in Vezenkov's game.
One more thing I would say is you made another good point there. I mean, just think about the sheer amount of threes the team wants to get up. They want threes to go up. So, like, Vezenkov's going to get his opportunities. And the off ball movement, and that ability to have a good grasp of that, where he needs to be, where he needs to go, cutting and all that stuff. I mean, you saw a rookie like Murray just find a niche role, and then it kind of slowly expanded. I don't think there's any question that he could fit right into that offense, and the amount of threes that they want to get up really facilitates that, and that's an important point. So I don't know, man. I mean, Sasha Vezenkov. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. You just don't know at this point, but there's so much, particularly on the offensive end, that kind of feels like it'll translate pretty well. And
At least for the Kings offense as well.
yeah, and that specific fit with them is key and important in all this. And I think, considering that whole notion of him being a star and the whole role thing, how that's going to translate. I mean, by him leaving, that would be an indication that he feels pretty confident that he'll get, a role that is sizable enough and, doable enough, I guess, that it'll work out for both parties. But that's the read right now, I would say, right?
Yeah, I think so too.